No, thanks. Good to see everybody again. And the program tonight is a little different than most of the programs that I've done in that there's not a specific subject, but there's a specific theme. And the theme is railroad-related subjects, and they're all in black and white. The idea for this program I got way back in 2007, and something I've been working on off and on since then. And the idea came from a program I saw at the Blue Ridge chapter NRHS meeting in Lynchburg, Virginia. The program was presented by Ralph Hawkins, and it was a black and white program of photos from his dad, John Hawkins, that his dad had taken in the late 50s, early 60s of still active steam locomotives in the South and the Southeast. And Ralph had scanned his dad's negatives into a digital format for the program. And a few months later, I actually invited Ralph down to Winston-Salem. He gave the same program to the Winston-Salem Historical Society. After seeing that program, I got the idea that I would like to do a similar program in black and white using some of my dad's photos and some black and white photos that I had been taking. Well, here we are 17 years later, and I finally have something to show you. As it turned out, I didn't have enough quality black and white photos of my dad's or my own to make a good program. So the idea persisted, and through the years, I kept looking for photos that I might add to the program. 8 years ago, I got my first subscription to Adobe Photoshop, and that really changed my outlook on not only this program, but my photography in general. I switched from a film camera to a digital camera, and that even gave me more possibilities. After working with Photoshop for the last few years, I now know about 1/10 of 1% of what Photoshop is capable of doing. And it's still kind of a work in progress for me. I enjoy the editing process as much as I do actually taking the pictures. Scanning and editing is time consuming, rewarding, and frustrating, because I can spend an hour on one picture tweaking it and end up with something less than what I had hoped for. Originally, I started by just trying to improve color slides, 35 millimeter slides that I had taken. And then the idea dawned on me, well, I wonder what this color slide would look like in black and white. And bam, that kind of changed everything. I now had a way to fix a whole collection of crappy color slides that I had taken, and a lot of my photos were taken on Norfolk Southern in prior Norfolk and Western territory, Southern West Virginia, in the coal fields. If you think about it, both Norfolk and Western and Norfolk Southern are black and white railroads. You go to West Virginia, Southern West Virginia, in the wintertime to shoot black diesels pulling black coal cars, and I'd get color slides back, and you couldn't tell that it was a color slide. It looked black and white already. So it was a perfect fix for some of those pictures to change them to black and white. And I said in the promo I did for the newsletter that TV cable channel Turner Classic Movies had an influence on this program. Well, Susan is a big fan of old movies, and particularly on Turner Classic Movies, they have a segment of film noir movies from the 40s and 50s. Think Humphrey Bogart and the Maltese Falcon. All those black and white films had great lighting, shadows, a grittiness to them that really kind of made them pop. And it dawned on me that that's the way I would like some of the pictures in my black and white program to look. And so I went back and redid a lot of pictures I already had to kind of give me that feel for that kind of look, the black and white. So over the course of putting this together, I've worked on about 400 pictures. And I've edited it down to what you're going to see tonight, to what I think kind of represents what I had in mind when I started the look and the the look and the feel for what I wanted it to look like. And I've been very fortunate to have seen a lot of places and things because of railroad photography, my hobby of railroad photography. And I like sharing them. So I hope you enjoy what you're going to see tonight. And if you will, I think you'll quickly understand why the title is Trains and Things in black and white. And if you'll stay with me till the very end, I have some before and after way I started with some of them and how they ended up. So you'll get an idea of how this program was created.
Let me make sure that can you turn both lights off? Is that okay?
Yeah. I was born in McDowell County, southern West Virginia, Welch, West Virginia. My dad ran it. He was the owner and manager of a business that sold sandwiches and ice cream. How would you like to be able to get a hand-packed quart of ice cream for 74 cents today? His name was Howard Hutchison. He unexpectedly died in 1963 at the age of 40. And 3 months later, we moved from West Virginia to Winston-Salem. But Dad liked trains. He was a photographer, took many family pictures, got me started in railroad photography. He would take me out trackside. Early on, he let me take some pictures. He was a modeler. He built Lionel and HO model for my brother and I. And unfortunately, he didn't have the time or the money to take a lot of railroad pictures, but the ones that I have are really cherished memories, and you'll see a few of them in the program tonight. But the store was Franklin's Dairy Store, and they were an outlet for Foremost Dairies. That was the milk and ice cream, Foremost Dairies at the time. And I think my brother and I, at some point, we had the run of the store, and we ate up a lot of the profits at the. But so we not only had an ice cream and sandwich store in the family, 25 yards outside of the front door of the establishment was the Norfolk and Western passenger loop that came through Welch. And in the 50s, that meant 6 passenger trains a day, 3 east, 3 west, all pulled by Class J steam locomotives like 611. So 611 became a very favorite engine for myself. This is downtown Yeager, West Virginia, spelled I-A-E-G-E-R. And this was, you can see in the very center, way in the background, is 611 backing up for a photo run by of this little group of people in this little southern West Virginia coal town. And Dutch and I were there not too long ago, and there's not a whole lot there. I've had a lot of good opportunities down at Spencer, at the North Carolina Transportation Museum. They have run a number of night photo sessions down there. And I try to be part of every one that they do. This particular one, the former Southern 280, number 542, they put it in the back shop and positioned it there. It was one of the locations for the night photo section. This is in the early 80s. This is leaving Roanoke on a rainy morning, headed west behind 611, and we're in an open car. And we had the opportunity to ride many excursions. And just a classic steam picture. Here's a piece of equipment on the Yadkin Valley Railroad up in Rural Hall, North Carolina. This was a short line that spun off from Norfolk Southern, and they ran from Rural Hall to North Wilkesboro, Rural Hall to Mount Airy. They now have trackage rights from Rural Hall to come down into Winston-Salem, North Yard. But all of their maintenance and all of their equipment, they had no buildings at all at Rural Hall. Everything was done outside. And this is just a high rail sprayer truck. This is the Boone's Mill, Virginia depot. This is just south of Roanoke on the line that runs from Roanoke to Winston-Salem. When I took this picture, the building was in pretty much disrepair. But fortunately, this building has been saved and moved a quarter mile down the track and completely restored. And it's open, for the general public. You can go by and see it. But it was a classic old wooden depot. This is in High Point at the High Point, Thomasville, and Denton Railroad shops. This, as far as I know, was the last active caboose on the Winston-Salem southbound, number 0670. 2 years ago, it was donated to Spencer, to the North Carolina Transportation Museum, and has been completely restored with funds from the Winston-Salem chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. And so it's in operation at Spencer. It runs on their caboose trains down there. And the actual photo, the caboose is gray and not red, because at the time, the general manager of the Winston-Salem southbound, John Egan, his roots or his background was from the seaboard, so he painted all the cabooses gray from red. But the folks down at Spencer did a really nice job of restoring this and painting the caboose. This was earlier this was back in 2019, excuse me. Susan and I went up to the Strasburg Railroad in Pennsylvania, and their engine number 90 on the left, and their little 260 number 89 was in the engine shed. This is at Blue Ridge, Virginia, just east of Roanoke. There's a little wooden trestle that crosses the track. This is looking west, and the train is a westbound freight train. And just so happened that I snapped this picture with almost identical boxcars in this particular picture. And I really like the way it turned out in black and white. This is a Lehigh Valley Coke little 060 tank engine that ran down at Spencer for a couple years. This is down at Salisbury at the depot. I took this picture. It was actually after dark, and that's my friend Jeff Miller on the platform. And I just used a slow shutter speed to capture the train, freight train headed headed southbound, I believe, at that point. These are abandoned freight buildings on the northeast side of Winston-Salem, near Smith Reynolds Airport and the Winston-Salem, the Norfolk Southern's North Yard. The track on the right was the connection from North Yard into downtown Winston-Salem, where it connected with the Winston-Salem southbound railroad. That line is currently out of service and cut off closer into town. And they say it's rail bank, but I don't know that they'll ever use it for anything. But the warehouses, you know, they made a good subject for black and white photography. This is the current mechanical department at the North Yard in Winston-Salem for Norfolk Southern. This is April of 1987. This was the first public trip behind Norfolk and Western 1218. It was pouring rain, and this shot is just spectacular to me. I mean, this is westbound, pulling up grade, the Christiansburg grade, west of Roanoke. And just that engine only ran for just shy of 5 years, and I hope some of you got to actually experience it and see it. Its engine's currently at the Virginia Museum of Transportation in Roanoke. This is the south end of that abandoned out-of-service track that I showed you. The buildings are former R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company buildings in downtown Winston-Salem. And this line, you know, if you built a line like that on your model railroad, somebody would say, well, that's not prototypical. But they actually weaved between those buildings, and everything behind me and to the right is now gone, and it's been redeveloped by Winston-Salem. But I thought that was interesting, the way it weaved through those buildings, and the track is still in place. This is the C&O engine, the 2662, that currently operates, well, hopefully it will operate again on the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad in Cumberland, Maryland. But back in 2005, I found it sitting on a display track in the parking lot of the B&O Railroad Museum in Baltimore, looking pretty forlorn. But it has been restored and ran for a season. It's down now for some maintenance, and they hope to get it back running again soon.
That's the B&O Roundhouse in the background.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. This is a shot of the yard in Roanoke, taken from an overhead highway bridge. This is an early 80s shot, early EMD and GE locomotives. And this part of the yard now is almost completely deserted. A lot of tracks have been removed. This is the freight depot that was at Salisbury on the Southern. This building was 200 feet long. This was taken in 2012. Shortly after this, the building was demolished. Unfortunately, it could not be repurposed because it sits in the middle of the Y track between the main line and the S line that runs from Salisbury up toward Asheville. So there was no way to access it without trespassing on railroad property. So it got torn down. This is also at Spencer in the Roundhouse, a shot of their former Southern GP30. I took this just this past May. Susan and I spent a few days up in Ashland, Virginia. And I went down to the depot after dark and made a nice nighttime photo of the Ashland station. That's looking north. Randolph-Macon College is just off to the right of this picture. It's directly across from the depot.
I have to think this is probably the busiest piece of railroad in the United States that goes right through the middle of town with the street on either side of it. It's pretty incredible.
We were there in May, and they said there were 50 trains came through a day.
How about that? We were there in May as well this year.
Really?
Yeah. We stayed at the Henry Clay Inn.
We did too.
Uh-oh.
Our granddaughter was at Randolph-Macon, and we went up to see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but it's a really neat little town, and it's also, not only is it great for rail fanning, but they just have a lot of little neat places.
They do.
This is former Southern 4501 coming into Radford, Virginia from a trip from Bristol. This was during the Norfolk Southern 21st century steam trips. And this is the same train later that day after it had been turned around, leaving, crossing the New River, headed back toward Bristol. Back in 2019, Susan and I went up to the Strasburg Railroad, and that was when 611 was making one of its visits up there. And during that time, Laro Photography staged a lot of photo sessions, and I got signed up for one of them. They would run, you could sign up for before sunup to 12 noon or from 1 o'clock to about 7 o'clock that evening. I did an afternoon photo session with them. This is the NW M Class 475, built in 1906 by Baldwin, and occasionally they will redecorate it, if you will, to the appearance of number 382, which was an actual NW engine that ran on the Abington branch, the Virginia Creeper line. So occasionally they'll kind of alter the appearance of 475 for special runs, and this particular weekend they changed it to 382 for some of the photo sessions. And this is, they had a mixed train on it, and this is at the depot in Strasburg. Here's the same engine, 475, in 1956 in Welch. That's me at 4 years old, standing there in front of the engine. The track on the left is the Welch passenger loop. It came off of the main line to the east of town, circled through town to the depot, and then continued out of town and reconnected with the main line. The Roanoke shops kind of gave this a retro look. This engine, a lot of brass, obviously a different kind of headlight and an old-time cow catcher. And it traveled the system, different communities for special occasions. And it was in Welch for a couple days, and I'm sure Dad took me down and took this photo. This is in 2019 as well on the same trip. This is what 475 looks like in regular service. for you modelers, all bridges aren't exactly perpendicular. This is on the former Virginian main line, just west of Salem, Virginia. Really very photogenic, really interesting bridge. And at this point, on the Virginian, it was electrified, and you can still see one of the angles and some of the insulators hanging off of the bridge where the power ran. But this crosses over the Norfolk Southern, or at the time, the Norfolk and Western. The Virginian crossed over the Norfolk and Western at this point. But real interesting bridge. This is a northbound train coming out of Winston-Salem, headed for Roanoke. This is at Walnut Cove. This was at North Carolina Transportation Museum at Spencer. This was a replica of the Lincoln funeral car. It toured the country, or toured, I'm not sure how extensively, but anyway, they had it at Spencer for a weekend. And they also had all the Civil War reenactors, both Union and Confederate, and they camped out on the grounds of the museum. And really interesting car. You know, this was, like I said, a replica. They actually had a casket. Everything was fixed up inside. And the original Lincoln funeral train ran April of 1865, almost 1,700 miles back to Springfield, Illinois, with Lincoln's body. And they even had representation of the dignitaries that would speak at all the stops that they made. Here's a shot of all the engines down at Spencer, all lined up in the roundhouse. It just happened to be a time when 611 was there at Spencer. Again, another one of their night photo sessions. This is the Seaboard Airline engine that they had parked out just south of the roundhouse and they had portable lighting out there. So. In 1985, 1986, when they were doing away with cabooses on the end of trains, for whatever reason, a lot of cabooses ended up in Winston-Salem. And they're lined up here on the old South Yard, which was the old Southern Yard. And I went over and got to explore and take some pictures of them. And nobody really cared. But some of them, this one on the end is an old Wabash caboose. And Wabash was absorbed, taken over by Norfolk and Western. But there were all styles, and a lot of them. Some of them were actually sold. People, individuals bought them where they went to be donated, but most of them just got scrapped. Here are 8 yard tracks full of loaded coal cars. This is what Bluefield Yard looked like in the 1980s. All these cars of coal waiting to go east, either for export or to power plants. Now you're lucky to see one train waiting for a crew change in Bluefield Yard. There are still bridges in Winston-Salem still lettered for Norfolk and Western. This is over 5th Street in downtown Winston-Salem. This is the out-of-service line that I showed you earlier. Again, this is back to Welch, the same day as that previous photo. Now, a westbound passenger train has come in and stopped at the depot, which is just off to the left of this picture. And that's a J class number 605, just like 611. Norfolk and Western built 14 of those, numbered 600 through 613. And 611 is the only one that survived. And you can barely see me in the cab of 475. This has always been one of my favorite pictures that my dad took. And back in 2019, when we went to Strasbourg, I had the occasion to, that's as close as I could get to reproducing that photo. Again, it's lettered 382, but it's actually 475, and that's 611 on that photo, Laro photo, that I was on that afternoon. This is in Bethania, North Carolina, just north of Winston-Salem. The train is coming back from Rural Hall, headed back to North Winston Yard, and that's a Nissan Wagon Company wagon. Nissan Wagon Company, later called Nissan Wagon Works, was a business in the Walltown area of Winston-Salem. Started in 1834 by John Nissan, and it stayed in the family, the Nissan family, until 1925, when it was sold to another company, and they continued producing wagons into the 1940s. In 1919, they were producing 15,000 wagons a year. And this is just a little display up in Bethania, and I just happened to catch this train coming back from Rural Hall. Again, riding behind 611, leaving Roanoke, and the smoke just happened to make a nice circle around the yard engines as we were leaving Roanoke. This is a shot at Bluefield, West Virginia, looking east. You have a empty hopper train leaving the yard, headed west back toward the mines, and the ever-present huge coaling tower in the background in the yard from the steam era. And that coaling tower still stands. Too big of a job to try to blow it up and cart it away, so you just leave it where it is. But you can't take this picture anymore because the bridge that I'm on, that's also been taken out. So I just thought this was an interesting shot, all the different textures. This is the dead line, the diesel's in a dead line in Roanoke Yard, taken from a highway bridge. A big Alco C630 being cut up at Cycle Systems in Roanoke. This is, again, mid-80s. The Alexander Railroad Company in Taylorsville, North Carolina. This is a little 18-mile short line that runs from Statesville to Taylorsville. And this is the end of the line, as you can see on the right. The track dead ends here at their office building. Their maintenance facility is not far from here, but this is their main office. And they've got a brisk little business. They do a good business, and it's very easy to photograph. Even the places they switch, and there's a state road that runs beside the railroad all the way pretty much from Statesville to Taylorsville.
I believe it also has one of the last signed bridges over an interstate highway that shows the Alexander Railroad on I-40,
Yeah.
just west of Salisbury.
This is a southbound CSX train just about to come through the tunnel at Alta Pass in North Carolina and head down the Clinchfield loops. This is the Roanoke Northeast Regional Amtrak train at the new Amtrak loading platform in Roanoke. And just happened to get up there early one morning and get a couple shots of this train. And as it leaves town, this is headed eastbound toward Lynchburg. Just out of the station, it goes through a really nice S-curve. And you guys are familiar with Rocky Mount. I think the club made a little field trip there last year. This is a northbound train coming into the depot. And some freight buggies down at the Salisbury Depot. That's a fairly recent picture. This is another really fun thing that you can do with Photoshop. It's kind of hard to tell maybe from this distance, but this posterized this particular picture. This is a lone diesel just about to enter Big 4 Tunnel number 1 in Big 4, West Virginia. But I did a little posterization on this particular picture, just again, just playing around with some of the capabilities of Photoshop. This is a 611 in the yard at Bluefield, had an overnight, was on a ferry moved to Portsmouth, Ohio, and spent the night in the yard in Bluefield. This is another one of my favorite photos that my dad took. This is Bluefield Yard taken from the north side of the yard. The building in the back is the former Norfolk and Western office building and dispatching. And just on the right of this picture, you can see the roof of the depot and the sheds over the platform. The depot's gone, it didn't survive, and obviously the train sheds are gone. But this would have been mid-50s. And again, like I said, I always liked this picture. I always wished, hey, I wish I could have been there to see this. I probably was, but I was too young to remember. But in 1993, I got a chance to shoot my version of it. 611 had come to town on an excursion, and I made sure that I got in that same position to duplicate as best I could the shot my dad took. This is in Thurman, West Virginia, deep in the New River Gorge. This was a wood-sheathed boxcar with steel ends and steel doors, and it's sitting beside the complete wooden engine shed that used to be in Thurman that mysteriously burned to the ground in 1993 before the National Park Service could preserve it. But with the help of Tom Dixon, Jr. and the C&O Historical Society, he helped me run down the lineage of this car, and it was a Pierre Marquette lineage, and it was a 40-ton auto boxcar. I have no idea what happened to it, whether it was burned up in the '93 fire or whether it got preserved. I haven't had any information on what happened to it. This was an interesting street sign I had never seen before. This is Campbell Avenue in Roanoke. And there's a street sign warning bicycle riders before going over the grade crossing. And here's my buddy. I'm riding one of the 1980s New River trains behind steam engine nickel plate 765. And we have made a stop in Montgomery, West Virginia, which was the usual stop when it was a steam-powered train to take on water. And I'm standing in the vestibule with one of the coaches and just happened to stop adjacent to this apartment building. And so here's a canine rail fan who is looking on with great interest.
Looks like he might live there by himself.
Yeah. But just one of those photos. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and he may have interrupted his dinner to see who was on the train. Here's a fairly recent shot of Cass from a couple years ago. And hopefully maybe in the future the club can make a trip up to Cass. But just a great ride and great old equipment, and perfect for black and white picture in the middle of the woods. And I made sure that I got on the end car, open air car. So as we went up the grade, you know, I got a great view. You know, Susan and I going up the grade, and the water tank and all the other fixtures that are up there are just great for photography. This is the Catawba River Bridge in Catawba, North Carolina. This is on the S line that runs from Statesville up toward Asheville. And good sized bridge that spans the Catawba River at this point. There's a shot from the side. They used to have a through train east and westbound every day, but that was eliminated several years ago. But made for a nice shot, and wasn't that difficult to get this angle. This was the last trip 611 made to Asheville, running out of Salisbury, and this was back 2015-16. The engine had a slow order coming over the Catawba River Bridge, and then as soon as he cleared, they opened up the throttle because he had an uphill climb to get out of the river level up toward Catawba. And just, even though it was backlit, it made for a spectacular shot. .611 again running beside Douglas International Airport in Charlotte. That's the current main line. It runs that close to the runway in Charlotte. And you can see just over the steam engine, there's a plane taking off. I think that's a C-130 transport. That, again, just one of those in the right place at the right time kind of picture. This is the bridge to nowhere. This is up in Marion, North Carolina, off of the old Clinchfield. The Clinchfield main line is to the right of this picture. And this was an industrial spur. The industry was behind me to the left. But when the industry no longer needed rail service, they came along and took out the approach on each side of the bridge, but they left the span over the river. And it's still there now. It's fairly easy to get to. This is up in Gary, West Virginia, off of the Tug Fork branch of the former Norfolk and Western. These are the remains of coke ovens in the side of the mountain there in Gary. There's a spur track here in the foreground. They would have lots of little loadouts for coal or mines all up in that area. And I'm standing on just a regular road with houses behind me. Very easy to get to and very easy to find if you go up in the wintertime. Another really photogenic location is Coopers, West Virginia. This is the huge trestle at Coopers. This is an eastbound train just about to go into Coopers Tunnel. And the track below is the former Norfolk and Western Bluestone branch. And the trestle there is from a line relocation in late 40s, and it opened up in 1950 to eliminate a single track tunnel and to alleviate some of the grade. Here's the other side. Again, in the wintertime, you can see the icicles hanging down from the tunnel portal. Rural Retreat, Virginia. A neat little passenger station that has survived. This was on the Bristol line of the Norfolk and Western, made famous by several photos from O. Winston Link, nighttime photos at this depot, and a famous recording, Christmas Eve 1957. He did a lot of audio recordings as well. If you go online and Google O. Winston Link Rural Retreat, you can actually hear the audio. He started recording, and the local church was playing Christmas carols on the bells, and he recorded a steam-powered passenger train coming into the station and stopping, and then taking off and whistling off into the distance for several minutes with the Christmas carols still playing in the background. This is a shot on the Dry Fork branch near Cedar Bluff, Virginia. And I've only rail fanned on this line 2 times and got fortunate enough to catch a train on this trestle.
Is that outside of Bluefield?
It's southwest of Bluefield, yeah, down towards Cedar Bluff and Richlands, Virginia. This is the reproduced train board down at the Salisbury Depot. And if you look in the very bottom right corner, it's from October 1908. And look at all the passenger trains that came and went to Salisbury. North Carolina Railroad's got a ways to go.
Well, in all fairness to North Carolina Railroad, Salisbury does actually have 5 trains
Yeah.
a day in each direction. So, North Carolina is to be commended.
For sure.
We are by far the most progressive southern state in terms of, restoring train service and that. But yeah, that's amazing. What's really interesting to me, and now that the DMV has moved out, I'm wondering if there's a way to get into the Jim Crow portion of the Greensboro station. there on the main level. Have you ever been inside of that?
I don't think so.
Oh my God, it's amazing. It is just like it was when they closed it down and they integrated the station. And it's still got the original Southern Railway train board in there. And if you went in to get your driver's license renewed, you could see all this stuff. But DMV moved out because Pam and I tried to go there a month ago. But
And Dutch probably remembers this. He and I were up in Mount Airy scouting around earlier in the year. And this is milepost 0 on the line to Mount Airy that comes out of Rural Hall on the Yadkin Valley Railroad. And just behind me is the switch to the Flat Rock branch that went out to the quarry. And just a few yards past that is the end of the line. But I had never seen a milepost 0 and kind of amazed that it was still intact.
Is the quarry still in business?
Excuse me?
Is the quarry still in business?
Oh, no, no, long. The track is still there.
the bridge is kind of there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's there, but it's got so much trees and brush up against it, it's actually shifted the bridge. I don't know if Steve has one of those.
No, I
pictures.
didn't include that.
Yeah,
but
that's kind of amazing.
Winston-Salem has a little industrial switcher. This is a remote control switcher at what used to be Corn Products plant on the south side of Winston-Salem. And all the covered hoppers that come down from Roanoke into North Yard go into this Corn Products plant. And it's now been bought out and renamed Ingredion Incorporated. And they make ingredients that go in food and pharmaceuticals, and they're very, they don't like people hanging around there. We actually tried to get a little tour, and our group, and they wouldn't have anything to do with it. But this is from a public highway, and so you can occasionally catch this little switcher doing its thing. Again, another shot from Strasburg back in 2019. This was an early morning photo train backing up for a run by, and beautiful Amish farms up there. And just happened to catch this little mule out there having his breakfast. Talcott, West Virginia. This is a little park memorial to John Henry. As the legend has it, he challenged a steam drill to bore the Great Bend Tunnel, which you see in the background there, and died in the process. And they have a little, just a little park, a lot of signage talking about the history. The current main line and the new tunnel is about 25, 30 yards to the left of this picture. But you can walk right down. They've got the tunnel fenced off, but you can walk right down. And there's moss growing on the side, and water stays in it all the time. The Hinton, West Virginia, the old C&O depot in Hinton. I know Dutch and Pam were there just recently. Hinton used to be a big division point on the C&O, a very large yard with steam engine facilities. And this next picture is from several years ago. This is looking west, and just west of the depot here was what used to be the yard. And again, another coaling tower that's not worth trying to take out, so they leave it. And Mother Nature is claiming reclaiming the whole area. That's the main line on the left, and this lighter circle area in the right foreground is where the turntable used to be. The Hamlet Depot down in Hamlet, North Carolina, before it was picked up and moved across the track to the left and restored. Great old building, and they did a super job in restoration if you've never been down there to see it. Here's a shot from Hawks Nest State Park in West Virginia. This is a eastbound coal train down in the New River Gorge.
By the way, one of the most enjoyable state parks in West Virginia, in my humble opinion, is the Hawks Nest State Park, because you can stay in the hotel up there, you can have dinner, you can watch the trains, kind of snaking their way through the valley. They'll come on both sides of the river. It's really a wonderful place to stay, and a nice train viewing thing in addition to the park, and being able to take a boat ride up the New River almost all the way to the high highway bridge, highest highway bridge in the United States.
Here's a nice action shot, 611 heading north. This is just on the north side of High Point. Here are a couple pictures from Welch, West Virginia, my hometown, just to give you a little background to the photo I'm going to get to. This was taken in the 1980s. There's a little bypass that goes over the mountain for Highway 52 that you can look down into Welch. That is the western leg of what used to be that passenger loop that ran through town. And the track on the upper side of this picture is the Tug Fork branch that, running to the left, goes out toward Gary, West Virginia. But the loop went around and reconnected to the main line, probably not a quarter of a mile from where this picture is. But the buildings you're looking at, that little triangular shaped building, there's 2 stories of apartments on top, and below is the Flatiron Drugstore. It dates back to way before when I was born there in '52. And actually, Dutch and I and a couple of guys went up there not long ago and actually went in the Flatiron Drugstore. But actually, you see a few cars, you see a little activity. The building on the right is the First National Bank. And very distinctive building you'll see in the next couple pictures. But I wanted to kind of give you a perspective of what you were looking at. The road in front of the Flatiron, that's McDowell Street. And just to the left in this picture, hidden by these buildings, on McDowell Street is where my dad's business was. Here is a busy Saturday afternoon in downtown Welch in 2015. I'm standing in front of where my dad's business would have been. All these buildings are gone, either burned or flooded out in the back-to-back 100-year floods in 2000, 2001. And you can see, just barely see the corner of the Flatiron Drugstore. This building on the left was a 3-story, it still is, it's a 3-story parking garage, and it was the first municipal parking building in the country when it was built in the 20s.
It still has the curving drive up too. So.
Yeah, it goes down and goes up. And again, you see the prominent First National Bank building. Well, back in the 50s, Welch is the county seat for McDowell County. So it was the hub of activity in the 50s.
On Saturday morning.
Yeah, well, they still celebrate the Memorial Day parade in November. It's still a big attraction for McDowell County. But just kind of give you a perspective of what it looked like in the 80s and again in 2015. Back in the 50s, when the passenger loop, the track was still there, here's what it looked like. Dad got a shot of one of the westbound passenger trains pulled by a J locomotive. You can see they've already strung Christmas lights, and this was the Veterans Day parade in November. And hundreds and hundreds of people. The downtown merchants complained for years they wanted the passenger loop removed, and finally in 1960 it did get taken up. The passenger station was turned into municipal offices, a fire station, police station, and the depot was moved east of town. Here's a perspective of the new positive train control signals. That's my friend Jeff Miller standing there. This is at Bluefield, Virginia, giving you an idea of the size of the signaling. Here's another scene of West Virginia. This is in Keystone, West Virginia. This building is gone, been gone, long gone. This is the double track main line in the foreground. Siding back behind went to a coal processing plant just off to the right of this picture. But the three-story building, if you can see, you can't read it from here, but the center of that ground floor, the door, it has a little lettering on top of it. That was the Keystone Post Office. And back behind it, you see behind the coal cars, that's just housing, wherever they can put housing on the side of the mountain, because there's not a whole lot of flat area up there. The King Cole Supper Club. This was in Welch, West Virginia. A lot of dances and different occasions were held here. It was also the offices for the McDowell County National Guard. And in the lower left, that's my dad's 51 Chevrolet. Dark green with about 100 pounds of chrome bumpers, 3-speed on the column. The Lost Engines of Roanoke. This was in Virginia Scrap Iron and Metal in downtown Roanoke, and these engines sat in the scrap yard since the 50s, just rotting away, and they were finally rescued and went to different locations. The manager of the Roanoke Transportation Museum, Virginia Museum of Transportation, kind of arranged to finally have these engines saved and moved out. And I actually went with him and some other folks and was able to get on the grounds and get some pictures before they were moved out. One of these engines got moved. It's in the Virginia Museum of Transportation, sitting right outside the main display area in Roanoke. This is 611 returning from a trip to Asheville, crossing over the former Clinchfield main line in Marion, North Carolina.
What year was that?
That would have been in the 90s. Before, the engine, the Norfolk Southern Steam program shut down in 94. So this would have been a trip sometime prior to that. This is an interesting picture. This was, again, what I was able to salvage with Photoshop. This picture was taken in almost no light. You can see above the tunnel portals, that little light area, that was what was left of the setting sun. This is looking west. This is in Superior, West Virginia, Huger Twin Tunnels. This is an eastbound coal train. And I was chasing it back east toward Bluefield. So at the time I snapped this picture, I didn't realize until after it was developed and I was looking that you can see I was being eyed by a coyote. and didn't realize it at the time. And kind of a sad picture here. This is the completely deserted Norfolk and Western, Norfolk Southern East End shops in Roanoke. Norfolk Southern shut these down several years ago. This was where Norfolk and Western built their steam engines. And after steam went away, it was diesel service. For a while, it was taken over by Freight Car America. They were building hopper cars. On the right-hand side of the picture, you see the 3-story, 4-story part of that building. After a steam engine boiler was rolled to the dimensions, they would lift it up vertically to do the bull riveting to put the boiler together. And that building is where they would lift the boilers up. That's why it has the height that it has. This is 1218 exiting Point Tunnel, 212 feet long. As you're coming down the southern loops, heading toward Old Fort, this is the last tunnel on the loops before you get to Old Fort. Real interesting structure. Again, for you modelers, it doesn't have to be a regular tunnel portal. Anybody see anything that's out of place in this picture? You have to look close. I don't think that's an original accepted nose herald for a Norfolk Southern diesel or Norfolk and Western diesel. Somebody has put a smiley face on.
Yeah.
This engine was in Schaefer's Crossing Roundhouse. Here is one of my earliest photographs. This is from April 1963. This is the now new Welch Depot on the east side of town. And my brother and I just ride our bikes out there. We were out there all the time. It would just, what we were able to do in the 50s in a small town in West Virginia, it would give everybody a heart attack now raising their kids. But I was 11, took this photo, and then in my journeys since then, who would know that 22 years later, that the diesel in the center of that picture is 513 in the dead line in Roanoke. Just a boxcar rusting away up in Rural Hall, North Carolina, still lettered for Norfolk and Western. Just the textures and everything just makes for a great black and white photo. The former Norfolk and Western office buildings in Roanoke, they're now apartments. Here's one of the other trestles in Winston-Salem, still lettered for Norfolk and Western. This is over Northwest Boulevard. And again, just, be great for modeling, just the angle that the track across the highway and what they did with the bridge supports. Be an interesting model for somebody to build. This is Clifton Forge. Got a night shot of the nickel plate 765. This was in the 1980s as well. This engine ran regularly on the New River trains for several years. We had a great run riding and chasing through the 80s. This is looking east. This is Welch Tunnel Portal, which I always found fascinating, how they were just so symmetrical. And when I did a little modeling, I always wanted to do my tunnel portals this way. But later on, Norfolk Southern, they needed to use this track for double stack container trains going west out to the Midwest. So they had a Heartland Corridor project where they either lowered the track through tunnels for clearance, or they cut notches in the top of the tunnels to clear for the double stack containers to clear. And now you see what they look like after they cut the notches. This is the other end of that tunnel. The train is eastbound, but some people have labeled them Mickey Mouse ear tunnels. Just a pile of old ties. This is in Vivian, West Virginia. This is Peerless Coal and Coke Company, 1921. This was the general store. Vivian was a huge area they had several mines, coal mines in Vivian. And this building still remains. It was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. And you have to kind of know how to get there to find it. There's one of those switchback single lane West Virginia roads that gets you off of 52 down to where this building is. But I happened to find a picture of it online back from the 40s when it was in its heyday. This was a really nice color photo, but I liked it in black and white because of all the texture. The Norfolk and Western office building on the left and Hotel Roanoke in the background. Here's another shot of the New River Gorge. This is from Grandview State Park in West Virginia, right off of Interstate 64. Looking west, the light area in the center of the photo, upper center of the photo, is Quinamont. And right around the corner to the left, as the river winds around, is Prince, West Virginia. And that's the former CNO. Again, another really nice park to go have a picnic and nice overlook. You know, you occasionally catch a train, catch folks rafting down the river. This was the remains of the Pomona Roundhouse in Greensboro. Again, they tried to save this, but it didn't happen. This was just, I think this was back in 2002 or 5. It was torn down shortly after that, but it was totally unoccupied, and I just was able to walk in and get some pictures. This is Pritchard, West Virginia, halfway between Williamson and Portsmouth, Ohio. Again, a huge, massive coaling tower where they would service steam engines running east and west between Portsmouth, Ohio and Williamson, West Virginia. Wintertime in West Virginia. It's kind of hard to see, but some snow flurries and icicles on the cliff behind the units there. This is some pushers heading back west to couple on to another coal train headed east. This is near the Elkhorn Tunnel in Mayberry, near Mayberry, West Virginia. I found this sign interesting. This was at Sparks, Nevada. This is right outside of Reno, the Union Pacific Yard. Remote control locomotives operate in this area. Locomotive cabs may be unoccupied. Track work in downtown Roanoke, which is all gone. All these signals are gone. All this track work has been straightened out to eliminate all the curves. They were in the process here. You can see in the lower right, they've already installed a switch that will become part of the new track. But right under the signal in the upper left is where the new Amtrak platform is now. The waiting room at Rocky Mount Depot, made for a nice picture. Another spectacular picture of 1218 upgrade westbound at Shawsville, Virginia. And what used to define the Norfolk and Western, their color position light signals, have pretty much all been replaced with positive train control signaling. And they just get torn down and scrapped or thrown off to the side. Is this a model railroad diorama or is this real? This was a night photo session from earlier this year at Spencer. And that's that Southern 542 in front of the Barber Depot. And they had lighting set up. But when I changed it to black and white and finished messing with it in Photoshop, it actually looks like it's a model railroad. This is on that abandoned track in the north side of Winston-Salem near North Yard. Kind of hard to see, but they're dated tie plates. On the left is 1935. In the middle is I think it's 30, and on the right is 31, with the name of the steel company that produced them. Are y'all all familiar with what a Union Pacific livery looks like? The Union Pacific diesels in nice armor yellow and gray with red striping. Well, this is what a Union Pacific diesel looks like after it's been in West Virginia coal fields for a while. This is in Wilco, West Virginia, just near Gary, West Virginia. This is Wilco Yard. And a Union Pacific diesel that had been working there, and I'm sure NS didn't wash it before it went back to Union Pacific. But
that yardmaster probably saw that working Union Pacific locomotive and said, I'm going to hang on to this.
This is the Texas, the famous engine that chased down the General in the great locomotive chase, 1862, where Andrews Raiders stole the General, running it toward Chattanooga, trying to destroy the line. And they got on the Texas and chased it down. This engine was restored at Spencer. This is a shot of it after they had finished with it. Scott Lindsay and his crew did the restoration on this engine. And Scott is the the gentleman, he and his company did the last restoration on 611 and is currently in charge of the maintenance for 611. But they did just a spectacular job restoring this engine. And this engine, let me get my note here. This engine, it's preserved at the Atlanta History Center. After they finished working on it, it went straight to a new display at the Atlanta History Center. This is some yard tracks at the Winston-Salem North Yard. I thought it was interesting that they would actually put a stop sign at the end of it. But builder's plate on the trestle in Welch, Virginia Bridge and Iron Company, Roanoke, Virginia, 1907. If anybody's familiar with Winston-Salem, running down Highway 158 or Stratford Road, one of the main retail streets in Winston, the line is out of service. That's Stratford Road over on the left. And the line's all grown up and paved over. And the reason the line's out of service is because of this trestle. This is a complete wooden trestle that comes out of downtown Winston-Salem, and the line would go out Stratford Road. But the NS has deemed this trestle unfit, and so the line was put out of service. And this is at Broad Street and Northwest Boulevard. And you really can only see it good in the wintertime when the foliage is gone. Yeah. This is a shot of 2716, a C&O engine that was used in the Norfolk Southern Excursion program. This was in downtown Winston-Salem in 1982. This is Ronsford, West Virginia. Just thought it was interesting. One of the yard crew getting warm inside a little shanty with a coal furnace or coal stove. All right, it's been a long day, rail fanning. We've come to the end of the evening. This was one of the photo charters at Strasburg. 611 was running with a freight consist, and it's come in to take water for the tender as the sun was setting. And I had been on this photo charter for all afternoon. And it was a long afternoon, but a lot of fun, but it was time to find a bathroom. My dad couldn't help but take this picture. He had me out looking at trains somewhere. And if this is not a Hal Roach, Little Rascals picture, you know, this is the way we grew up in West Virginia. When you came in from playing all day, you take your shoes off and your feet were black through your socks with coal dust. And as the train disappears around the curve, we've come to the end of the program. But the absolute end, this coyote didn't make it. So that is the end of the black and white program. Now, the other two pictures I want to quickly show you to give you a before and after. Here was my color slide of the shot from Grandview State Park. The lighting wasn't good. The sky was just washed out. And there's what it looked like when I changed it to black and white.
Wow. That's much nicer.
Yeah.
Much nicer.
And again, this was 611 in the yard in Bluefield. washed out, no sunlight, you know, not enough light to really do anything for the color. But it looks just fine in black and white. Thank you, folks. That's it.
Thank you.